to do. And another big thing that I think might be good for us to do is to learn how to pause the game. So one thing you see a lot of, this question you see a lot in the forums is, how do I pause my game? Which in concept seems simple, but in practice is very difficult, because you can have a lot of different kinds of processes going on in the game. Timers, you can have physics, etc., etc., and all of these have different concepts of what it means to pause. And so you may be able to simply pause the physics, but if you've got an outstanding timer, you need to find a way to get that timer to both stop where it's at and then start up again in such a way that you don't cause issues with your game's logic. So I think, assuming that everything else goes well, we will talk about pausing in the future. So enough of the stuff that we're going to talk about. Let me just show off some of the cool things that are in here. Now, after today's show, people will be able to download this, and I encourage you to dig in right away. It's not going to be beautiful, but at the same time, it's highly functional. Let me, let me get this expanded a little bit. Let's make this bigger so we can see this. There we go. Unfortunately, I don't have a good resolution that fits the screen. So let me restart this and talk about what you're seeing here. Besides the meters, which I've got on right now, one of the things I'm going to show people how to do is this fly-in effect. Some various effects that you can have for your interfaces. Nice timings. You saw how the bottom menus flew in at the end. You had a little bit of twirling going on here. And then one of the things that they did in the original game was the interfaces came in, and about 30 seconds later, they started to do some of the special effects that were associated with the games. You got these little explosions, and we don't have the grid here, but little grid things, and just little eye candy to keep you entertained, even when you're just sitting there at the menu. Another thing that is very new for this game is, because we're going to be doing desktop and mobile, one of the things you can do with a controller game is you can control the menus. So you've got these menus: play, options, and quit, or buttons, I should say. And I'm not touching the screen, I'm not using my mouse. This motion you're seeing is a response to my gamepad input. And so what I've done is I've taken, let me back up a little bit. In a previous episode of Corona, we had a talk about object-oriented programming, and I said, well, I'm not a big fan of object-oriented Lua and Corona, except for in certain circumstances. And one of those circumstances is creating a button class. So it was an appropriate method or solution for creating a button class. And we did at that time create a button class. We created a push button class and a toggle button class using the log30 object-oriented programming Lua library. It's like this little tiny snippet of code that makes it easy to write OOP or classes in Lua. And so we've been using that in these games for a while now for our buttons. And I realized that this was the perfect situation for us to take and extend the push button class to create a new subclass of push button that is gamepad aware and can understand the concept of next button, as in the next button from the play button is the options button, but the previous button from options is playing, and then have it listen for key events also. So this is, we'll take a day or a hangout in the future to just talk about extending that for people who are OOP interested and think that's a good idea. And in this case, it is a good idea. Let's see. Let's get in there and play a little bit. So like I said, you get a new life at every 1,000 points currently. So I just got a new life, and I should get one here again shortly. And as you can see, let me pause here. So the trick here is that I want to go into in a future show is this HUD is actually just one graphic. So what I ended up doing was using a very simple technique called wrapping, texture wrapping. And so as you get more lives, you can't really tell this, but what I've done is simply take what was a square object and X scaled it. So it was scaled 1 horizontally, and then when I got 2, I scaled it twice, and I have it anchored to the center, so it's basically extending to the left. And every time it extends by 1 scale, so 1, 2, 3, it's got texture wrapping enabled for that object, and so it automatically displays the next image that is part of the, it wraps the image. All we have is a little image of this ship. And so it's a very straightforward technique with just a few pieces of additional knowledge you have to have, or things you have to consider. So we'll talk about that technique. The same thing is used here on the mine HUD. It just extends in the other direction. Another thing you'll see here, let me go ahead and resume the game, is if you look at the score counter, you'll see that it's rolling up. It doesn't just switch right up to the next score. So when I hit an enemy, I get, for example, let's let these guys come in here. I think it's 250 points for each diamond, and 150 points for the pinwheels. I can't remember what I set them at right now. And what happens here is the score counter is very much like the ones we've written before, where it's listening for a score increment event. But instead of just setting itself immediately to the new score value, it uses a transition combined with some other code to roll that score up. So it gives it that nice visual effect like we're used to seeing in arcade games, where the more you play, you got this rolling score. You never quite know what your score is, but you know it's going up really fast. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, so another thing you're going to be seeing here in the background is last week we talked about spawning. And I initially said that I was going to use what I call quad spawning, or I used some terminology like that. And the essence of that is that enemies would spawn in the corner or the quadrant that you were not in. So currently, I tried that out, and I found that it did not work. In fact, let me scale this down so you can really see what's going on here. Spawn grid true. Let's see, grid size. Let's make it 15 so it's small enough to fit on the screen. Let's reboot, restart this puppy. Let's go ahead and go into main and go directly into the play GUI. Sorry. So, all right. So we're in there. Now we're on. I've basically shrunk down the. And let's make this one enemy because I'm clearly unable to talk and play at the same time. Maximum enemies 1. All right. Now I can keep up. I can talk. So what you're seeing here is I shrank the board down by just adjusting some metrics in common to make the grid sizes much smaller. And as a side effect, then the whole board itself generates so small that it fits on the screen. Now let me point out some of the things you're seeing here. You're seeing these red bits here and green bits, and you see as I move my ship, they turn these little squares turn red. Or sort of red. And then every once in a while you'll see one, let me do it again here, you'll see one turn yellow. Now a yellow one indicates that has been selected as the grid where the spawn is about to occur. So there's an algorithm in the background that's saying, do I need to spawn a new enemy? Oh no, there's a maximum limit of 1 on the screen. There's already 1 on the screen. I don't need to spawn. But as soon as I destroy this guy, then it says, nope, not enough enemies, got to go spawn another one. And it says, okay, well how do I do that? Now the way I do that, it's going to kill me, I'll get back down to the middle. Let me pause this. So what I've done is this goes to actually a question that I got, and I get this question in the forums all the time in various formats, not to me specifically, but I try to answer them when I can because I've answered it once, I have the answer in my back pocket. And the answer is the easiest way to detect where an object is to use sensors. So what I've done is I've created little grids, a grid 1, 2, 3, 4 across and 4 down of just rectangular objects, which I'm currently filling with green, red, or yellow at about 50% alpha. And then I attach a physics body to each of these, and I make them static so that gravity won't pull them down. They don't get pushed around. And then finally what I do is I make them a sensor. And what that says is you basically detect collisions, but you don't respond. You don't push things, you don't get pushed. None of the responses